The age of our confinement, the era when gravity's invisible chains held us captive, is over. And this isn't about the first moon landing, nor the first orbital stations that barely scratch the void. It's about the turning point, when self-sufficiency beyond Earth ceased to be a theory and became a colossal reality. That was the true beginning. What followed was no accident. It was a deliberate evolutionary leap that redefined us as a species. We unleashed the latent power in the heart of the atom to turn our solar system into a network of highways. We learned to ride on beams of light to cross the void between stars in a single generation. And most daring of all, we had to rewrite our own genetic code, strengthening our bodies to thrive in environments where life, as we knew it, could not exist. This is the chronicle of that ascent, the chronicle of how humanity ceased to be a planetary species and became a galactic force. Our ascent was forged in the fire of 3 great revolutions, each built upon the last. The first was the infrastructure revolution. Our robotic swarms descended upon moons and asteroids not to plant flags, but to turn them into the gears of a self-sufficient economic machine. Every mine that plunged into the rock of an asteroid, every orbital refinery that distilled the ice of comets, every spinning habitat that roared to life was another gear in a colossal engine, a planetary-scale launch platform designed with a single purpose: to accumulate the power needed to propel humanity towards the stars. We built the largest engine in human history, but an engine, no matter its size, is useless without the right fuel, and for the journey we envisioned, we needed a fire on an entirely new scale. So we ignited the second revolution, the energy revolution. We tamed the power of nuclear fusion, the same engine that fuels the suns, and locked it in the heart of our ships. With this new power, the interstellar abyss shrank. Journeys of millennia became voyages of a single human lifetime. The stars, at last, were within our reach. But then we faced the harshest truth. We could build the ships to get there, but our bodies would not survive the journey. It was useless to conquer the stars if our fragile biology made us prisoners within our own creations. The universe would not adapt to us. So, in the most radical act of our history, we adapted to it. We gave way to the third and most profound revolution, the biological one. We fortified our DNA against cosmic radiation, redesigned our physiology for other gravities, and transcended the limitations imposed by our home world. We ceased to be just human, to become, at last, true citizens of the cosmos. The destination is clear, but the story of that ascent is too monumental to be told in one sitting. It is an epic that must be divided into 2 parts. In this first chapter, we will chronicle the revolution that made us masters of our solar system. Then, in the second, we will reveal how we broke the chains in order to conquer the void. Subscribe and witness the first step in humanity's greatest transformation. But that conquest did not begin in distant stellar domains. It was forged here, at home. Before we could run to the stars, we had to learn to walk through our own solar system. And to walk, we had to sever the umbilical cord to Earth completely. Self-sufficiency became our one and only mandate. The first challenge was gravity. For a century, every rocket was a single-use monument that ended with billions in technology sunk in the ocean. The first crack in that wall was opened by pioneers from companies like SpaceX with their reusable rockets. They didn't just lower the cost, they changed the mindset. Access to orbit ceased to be an expedition and became a constant cargo bridge to space. But we soon discovered that even this bridge was insufficient. Building an entire civilization based on shipments was still economic suicide. This forced us to adopt a more radical solution, not to transport, but to create, which presented a new obstacle: the insurmountable distances for real-time dialogue with Earth, an echo of instructions taking up to 40 minutes to cross the void. Therefore, the vanguard of this new era was not remote control, but our autonomous builders. we unleashed swarms of robots guided by a local artificial intelligence, a direct descendant of the robotic minds that guided NASA's first rovers like Perseverance. They landed on the Moon and Mars and began to consume the landscape. Their method was laser sintering. A powerful beam melted the regolith, the rock dust, into a controlled lava that was extruded and solidified layer by layer. It was like commanding a miniature volcano, raising the very walls of our first citadels to shield us from the relentless cosmic radiation. But our robots were not just builders. They became miners. They fulfilled the promise of the first probes from NASA and ESA, which decades earlier had mapped the most valuable resource in the cosmos: water. They ventured into the craters of the Moon that had never seen sunlight and drilled into the frozen subsoil of Mars. This feat of using the resources of the environment to survive and thrive was named In Situ Resource Utilization, or ISRU, and it became the bedrock principle that made all colonization possible. The ancient ice they extracted not only gave us water to drink and air to breathe. By separating it into hydrogen and oxygen, we created the fuel that powered our expansion. Each ice deposit became an interplanetary gas station, and the solar system at last had its highways. With the shelters in place, we faced a more subtle enemy: darkness. Solar energy proved to be too fragile a lifeline. To live on it was to live with the constant fear that a 14-day lunar night would freeze vital systems, or that a Martian dust storm would plunge us into an icy blackness for weeks, extinguishing civilization before it could be born. We needed a constant heartbeat. So we lit our own suns in the darkness. We deployed the direct heirs of NASA's old kilopower project, fission hearts of uranium, each the size of a shipping container. The principle was simple and brutal. Each reactor used fission, the controlled splitting of atoms, to generate intense and constant heat. This heat, in turn, drove engines that converted atomic decay into the electrical pulse that became the throbbing core of each colony, an inexhaustible source of power that kept the promise of a human future alive. And that led us to the final challenge, the most intimate of all: life itself. We could build walls and generate energy, but how could we sustain a biosphere millions of kilometers from home? It was here that we broke the last chain. We brought the lessons learned over decades on the International Space Station to a planetary scale, perfecting closed-loop life support systems. Our lungs no longer ended in our bodies. They extended to the great bioreactors of the colonies, brilliantly green tanks where genetically optimized algae colonies consumed our carbon dioxide and, in return, gifted us the pure oxygen of our next breath. Every drop of water was purified and returned to the system in a perfect molecular dance. It was a triumph, but also a profound psychological shift. We declared our biological independence from the planet that gave us birth. But even with independence secured, we faced a fundamental truth. Our bodies were designed for Earth's gravity. Long-term life on the Moon or Mars was still a sentence of physical deterioration. So we took the next step. We didn't just conquer worlds, we learned to build our own. In the vacuum of space, we assembled colossal orbital habitats, realizing the designs dreamed up a century earlier by pioneers like Gerard O'Neill and the teams at Stanford, cylinders and toruses kilometers in diameter. The principle was as elegant as a shepherd's sling. The constant rotation of these megastructures generated a centrifugal force that pushed everything towards the inner hull, perfectly simulating Earth's gravity. For the first time, humanity imposed its own laws of physics upon the cosmos, forging islands of civilization where our children could grow as strong as they would on Earth, finally freeing us from the tyranny of planets. With these pillars established, autonomous construction, limitless energy, and self-sustaining life, growth ceased to be linear and became exponential. The conquest of the solar system was no longer a series of isolated missions, but a chain reaction. Each new base became the starting point for the next. Each mined asteroid provided the metals to build 2 more habitats. The void ceased to be an obstacle and transformed into a network of trade routes, plied by fleets of silent freighters. These ships didn't roar with chemical fire. They glided, propelled by a bluish whisper, high-efficiency ion engines. Fueled by our reactors, they didn't create an explosion, but used electromagnetic fields to accelerate gas atoms to incredible speeds. Their thrust was gentle, almost imperceptible, but constant. For months, they pushed relentlessly, transporting metals from the asteroids to the orbital forges with a fuel efficiency that chemical rockets could never dream of. Thus, the solar system ceased to be a void dotted with dead worlds and transformed into a sphere of human power. A network of outposts, mines, and orbital habitats spinning in a perfectly synchronized dance. And in that network, the first truly extraterrestrial identities began to be born. The children of Mars, forged by the red soil, and the inhabitants of the spinning worlds, whose only homeland was the void. But it was just the cradle. Once mastered, it became too small. To reach our maturity, to claim our true destiny, we had to look towards the abyss that separates the stars. With the solar system's resources now at our command, we had forged the industrial engine of a galactic civilization. The machine was built. Its purpose was clear, but a machine of this scale, designed to break the frontiers of space itself, required a power source of unimaginable proportions. The chemical flames that brought us to the moon were mere sparks compared to the inferno we needed to ignite. The first revolution was complete, but it only led us to a greater challenge: how to fuel an exodus to the stars. That challenge is at the heart of our next chapter, already waiting for you on your screen. Click and witness how we ignited the suns that transported us into the great void. We will not only master the atom, we will unleash its fury on a scale that transformed reality itself.